Okie doke. If you are grinding that ranked matchmaking ladder, mostly for land battles, though I'm sure some of these tips apply to domination too. Probably not all of them. I mostly play land battles, so that's when I know what I'm talking about. And if you're having troubles getting some wins or you just want to improve your play, here are 5 tips for you. Now, I will note this is to win. You might have a rebuttal where I like blank and blank unit, or I like doing this and this. That's cool. Do that. This video is just if you're having trouble winning and you want some wins. These are my advice. If you just like how you play, then play how you play. I don't give a fuck. All right, let's get into it. Number 1. You need a caster. You almost always need a caster if you want to win a game. It's like playing chess without a queen if you don't bring a caster. They're just super versatile and do tons of stuff. Now, when you take a caster, here's a 2-for-1 because that was a little too obvious. When you take a caster, you usually want at most 2 spells. You usually just want 2 spells. The problem with taking more spells, you might be like, oh, I could take 4 in case of all these situations. It's never going to be worth it. Like the money you're paying, the winds of magic you're paying are not worth it. Is it more worth it to just cast Spirit Leech 3 times, or is it worth it to cast Aspect of the Dread Knight once, Spirit Leech once, Doom and Darkness once, Soul Blight once, and spend 300 more gold on your caster instead of getting, like, I don't know, a Clan Rat or something, right? So you probably only want 2 things. If you ever want the lore passive, usually it depends on how you have your spells set up, where if you have cheap spells, bring the lore passive, and if you have more expensive spells, do not. Like, if you only brought Fate of Buna as your only spell, you're going to get 2 or 3 casts of it all game, and Life Leeching isn't worth it. More to the point is, like, Lore of Life, right? Life Bloom, you get some mild healing for your whole army. If you have Earth Blood, good. If you have just Regrowth, not good. It's a waste of your money. So you could take Life Bloom off and save some cash there. So, on your caster, don't take all the spells. Just take 2 or so. Makes them a lot cheaper. Next, and this is the big one that I'll get pushback on, but I like it. Again, if you like playing that way, that's fine. But in general, if you want to win, having a large, super expensive, big, awesome monster is actually a detriment to your chances of winning. I'm thinking of the Shredder of Lustria, other Dreadsaurians, any of the fancy Stegodons, the Troglodons, things like that. Or for the Tomb Kings, like the giant kitty cats or the Hyro Titan. Things like that. Most giant monsters in the game are not worth their cost, and even the ones that are require a lot of support. They require usually healing, and they require to get good engagements. And if you're struggling to win games, that usually means you're newer to the game and prone to mistakes. And large monsters can tend to just wander off, get isolated, and get killed. And if you think about it, man, 3,700 gold for the Shredder of Lustria, that's like a quarter of your army that you might lose in one bad exchange. And one bad exchange is also key, like Rattling Guns, the shotguns of the Chaos Dwarves, the Luminarch of Hysh from the Empire. There's a lot of stuff out there that does insane DPS to large monsters. So large monsters aren't as tanky as you might suppose. Now, they're useful. You'll see them a lot at high levels of play. But if you're struggling to get wins on the ladder, I think one of the easiest things you can do to up your win rate is cut out those giant monsters and go a little safer. Same with like Nurgle. Kugath is a neat option, but he's actually very fragile. You really need to kill off any ranged capacity your opponent has, and then he can grind out the melee. But like, if you're not fully on top of your micro or able to take out that range capacity, then Kugath's just a detriment to you. Next thing I would set up is get a winning frontline. I don't know if I should branch this into 2 things, just one thing, but drafting a winning frontline really does help you throughout the game, rather than going with super ranged heavy, which will be the next hint we do. But if you can get a winning frontline where, like for the Skaven, maybe mix some Plague Bunks in with your Clan Rats, or if you're playing Norska, mix Marauder Champions in with basic Marauders. If you can get a winning frontline, you put your opponent under pressure, and the frontline is the part of the battlefield that requires the least micro. You generally just send your frontline in and get them to start fighting, so if you can get a frontline with higher stats than your opponent, then you'll at least win somewhere and you have something to retreat to. Like if your cavalry is losing, or your archers are under duress, at least your front line is pressuring their back line, something like that. So I would usually draft a winning front line. That doesn't mean put all of your money into it, but at least get a couple elite units, get some good damage dealing units, like we said, Plague Monks for Skaven, for Norska get some Marauder Champions or something. High Elves, I like to mix in 1 or 2 White Lions of Krace along with the Spearmen. Just something like that. If you have a really defensive front line, then it'll hold forever, but it won't really win. It won't put your opponent under pressure. It just makes it harder for you to win the game. So try and draft a winning front line. This next hint is very apt for Skaven, but also works for any faction, I suppose. The 3-to-1 ratio. Now, at super high levels of play, players will not obey the 3-to-1 ratio. But again, if you are struggling, you need to have 3 melee units, at least, to every ranged unit. Now, that might seem insane, but I've seen a lot of Skaven builds that look something like this. Right, something like that. And then, let's see, you have Deathmaster Snitch, then you have a Warlock Engineer, and you get some Clan Rats. There, something like this. You have 7 melee units to defend 7 ranged units. It never works. I can't think of a single ranged unit in this entire game that can do enough DPS at something running straight at it to ever pay for itself or deal enough damage to be significant before that thing gets to it. Every single ranged unit needs blockers. They need people to hold things in place while they shoot to get their value back and beyond. And if you have like 7 ranged units and 7 melee units, that's just not enough. They are always going to get overwhelmed. They are always going to get shut down, and you will lose very, very frequently. So do try to have 3 or more melee units per ranged unit, and just have less ranged units that you defend better, rather than a ton of ranged units that you just leave entirely on their own. This kind of goes hand in hand with, was it tip number 2? The one where I said something about having a winning front line. Now, this is a warning that turns into a tip. I see this a lot with Vampire Counts and Skaven, but people take a bunch of frontline, like Clan Rats and Skaven Slaves, or Zombies and then Skeletons, and there's no room on the battlefield for them. They just have too many melee units, so we end up with a blobbed up frontline, like this. And then you have Skeletons that can't really get to the front line because they're stuck behind the zombies, right? You can see them highlighted in green arrows. They can't even reach the front line. The zombies are in the way. And this is all this money doing nothing, and then they group up like that. That Burning Head or Pendulums or things can go down the line and hit multiple units. I see this so often, and there's a pretty easy way to avoid it. Instead, what's better than getting 2 different chaff units and just stacking them on top of each other? You can get units of varying intensity, and you might be like, Clan Rats and Skaven Slaves, or Skeletons and Zombies are differing intensity. No, they're not. They're both chaff units, in effect. Or you could get monstrous infantry like Rat Ogres or Crypt Horrors. Right? So for this example, we got Crypt Horrors, we got Graveguard to show you both things at the same time. So you spread out your front line rather than layering it so that things don't run into each other as much, like the Skeletons ran into the Zombies. Now we have less infantry, but we make them cover more space. We pair Crypt Horrors with Zombies, and Graveguard are on their own, since the Graveguard will deal damage in their own right. And we'll pair the Crypt Horrors with the Zombies. Now, the same thing you could do for Greenskins. You usually want to pair Trolls on top of Goblins, but if you have Savage Orc Biggins or something, you'll just leave them on their own. But the Crypt Horrors have enough mass to get through the Zombies and actually saturate the front line, unlike the Skeletons we just saw. And the Graveguard don't need any help. They're elite enough on their own to get some good kills and get some good damage out. Well, that one's getting distracted, so for the sake of our example, we don't care. And you can see now the Crypt Horrors are all the way up to the front and fighting, while the Zombies still run in between their legs and get some good damage down. The Graveguard are just winning their fight on their own. We're not as big of a blobbed up target for Burning Heads, and having different sized models also means that the same spells aren't going to be good versus Zombies that are versus Crypt Horrors. Like a Burning Head won't do any damage to Crypt Horrors, but Spirit Leech won't do that much damage to Zombies, so they're a little safer in numbers there. And now you have some winning infantry that can actually get through that front line, as opposed to just having so much garbage chaff that doesn't get anywhere. Hopefully some of those tips were helpful for you if you've been struggling to win quick battles. And again, I'll iterate one last time before the comment section still gets flooded with them. If you don't want to do that, or if you just want to play for fun and play whatever units you want to take, that's great. You do that. I was just offering some support for people that were wondering how to improve their win rates and just are willing to try that stuff out. If you enjoy taking your Feral Dreadsaurian and giving it a ton of healing and hoping for the best, then go ahead and do that, man. Good luck out there. Hope you get some wins. Roar.
Subscribe, yes, yes.